My name is Mara Ellison, 32 years old. This whole mess began on what was supposed to be the best weekend of the year, my birthday weekend. I had spent weeks planning it, telling myself I deserved a break after months of grinding at work and carrying more weight for my family than anyone ever acknowledged. My friends and I were going to celebrate at my parents' country house, the same house I'd been paying the mortgage on for the past year and a half. Meanwhile, my younger brother, David, 26, 6 years younger than me, had been living there rent-free, like a permanent guest at an all-inclusive resort. The arrangement was simple, at least in theory. My parents had agreed he could stay there, but whenever I needed the house for a vacation or special occasion, he'd clear out for a few days and stay with them. That was the deal. So, 3 days before my birthday, I sent him a text. Nothing complicated, just letting him know I'd be coming up that weekend with friends to celebrate and asking if he could tidy the place up a bit, pick up his mess, run a vacuum, maybe wash the dishes. The message showed as read on my phone, but David never bothered to reply. Typical. Still, I figured he got it and would stick to the plan. When we pulled up to the house Friday night, I knew immediately something was off. The windows were blazing with light, and music thundered through the walls, thick, bass-heavy beats that made my chest vibrate even from outside. My heart sank. "Sounds like your brother started the party early," my friend Jessica joked, grabbing her overnight bag from the trunk. The others chuckled politely, but I forced a tight smile. Inside, my stomach knotted. This wasn't the plan. He was supposed to be gone. We climbed the front steps, our laughter already fading under the thump of music. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder, but the sound was swallowed whole by the music. My pulse quickened. "Maybe they can't hear you?" Jessica suggested, her tone careful. I pounded the door with both fists. "David!" I shouted. "Open up! It's Mara!" My friends shuffled behind me, their smiles awkward now. This wasn't how anyone wanted to start a birthday weekend. I called his phone. It rang and rang. No answer. Just when I was ready to scream, my phone lit up. "David." "What?" His voice was flat, irritated. "What do you mean, what? I'm standing outside. Open the door." A pause. "Oh, yeah, hold on." Minutes crawled by before the door creaked open. David leaned against the frame, a glass of red wine sloshing in his hand. His shirt was wrinkled, hair a mess, eyes glazed with that familiar glassy look he always got when he'd been drinking too much. But what hit me wasn't just him. It was what sprawled out behind him. The living room was packed shoulder to shoulder with strangers. 20, maybe 30 people, cups in hand, laughing, talking over the music like they owned the place. "What the hell is all this?" I demanded, pointing inside. "I told you 3 days ago I'd be here for my birthday." David smirked, taking a sip. "Yeah, well, change of plans. I'm having my own party tonight." I blinked. "Your own party? This is my birthday weekend. We agreed." "Look, Mara," he slurred slightly, waving his hand dismissively. "You and your friends need to get out. This is my party, in my house. You're not welcome here tonight." I froze. The words stung like an open-handed slap. Behind me, my friends shifted uncomfortably, whispering. Humiliation boiled in my chest. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Where am I supposed to go? I planned this whole weekend." "I don't care." David cut me off. "Find somewhere else. This house is taken tonight." And with that, he slammed the door. The lock clicked a second later. My name now. I stood there, staring at the painted wood inches from my face. My jaw clenched, my hands trembling. My friends didn't say a word, but I could feel their eyes burning into my back. The music kept pounding, louder now, like it was mocking me. Finally, I pulled out my phone and dialed the one number I thought would fix this. My mom. She answered quickly. "Mara, what's wrong?" "David won't let me in," I said, my voice breaking. "He's having his own party and literally just slammed the door in my face. You need to call him and tell him to stop this." Silence. Then, "Mara, maybe you should just leave. David said you weren't welcome tonight. And honestly, he's right. You should find somewhere else to celebrate." I staggered back a step like the floor had shifted. "What are you talking about? Mom, this doesn't make any sense." "Hold on, I'll get your father." A moment later, Dad's voice cut through, calm and detached. "Mara, you need to understand something. That house belongs to David now. He decides who comes and goes." "Belongs to what? Dad, I've been paying the mortgage for a year and a half. How does it belong to David?" The mortgage payments don't matter, he said smoothly, as if explaining a business deal. We transferred the property to David. It's his house now. You need to respect that. The words hit me harder than the slammed door. You transferred it? When? Why didn't you tell me? We don't need to discuss our decisions with you, Mom's voice returned, sharp. The point is, David owns it now. You need to leave his property. My throat burned. Behind me, my friends stared at the driveway gravel, pretending not to listen. My birthday was unraveling into a public humiliation. My family had given away the house I'd been paying for, and I was standing in the driveway like a trespasser. Fine, I said finally, my voice flat. Thanks for clearing that up. We drove back to my apartment in silence. The car felt heavy. The laughter of earlier evaporated. At home, Jessica tried to rally the group. Chinese takeout, wine, candles, even a cake. They sang Happy Birthday, voices awkward but warm, trying to salvage something. I forced a smile, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying it. David's smug face, the lock clicking shut, my parents' voices backing him up. It was surreal, but also familiar. Because if I was honest with myself, this wasn't the first time my parents had chosen David over me. It was just the most blatant. As the night dragged on, the jokes faded and my friends grew quieter, respecting my mood. I sat at the kitchen table with my untouched slice of cake, staring at the flickering candle wax. My heart ached, but not just from tonight. The truth was, this whole disaster didn't begin with a slammed door. It began years earlier, when my parents first bought that country house and pulled me into a deal I should have walked away from. And sitting there, on my ruined birthday, I finally realized I needed to go back to the beginning to explain how everything spun out of control. 2 years before that humiliating night on my birthday, everything seemed almost innocent. My parents came over to my apartment one evening, glowing with excitement, clutching a glossy brochure like they'd just discovered buried treasure. Mara, Mom said, practically bouncing as she set the papers on my coffee table. We found the perfect place, a country house only an hour outside the city. 3 bedrooms, a big deck, right on the lake. Can you imagine family weekends out there? I studied the photos, sunlight sparkling off the water, the kind of staged pictures designed to make you feel like happiness itself came with the property. It's beautiful, I admitted cautiously. Then I frowned. But can you actually afford this? Another mortgage on top of your bills? Dad waved a dismissive hand, as though money was just a minor technicality. We'll cut back on a few things. Eat out less. Cancel some subscriptions. We've got it all figured out. I remembered how, just the month before, I'd covered their overdue electric bill, and the month before that, I'd helped with a late car payment. The idea of them taking on another loan made my stomach clench. Are you sure? I pressed. Last month you said things were tight. Mom bristled. We're adults, Mara. We know how to handle our finances. Besides, this isn't just for us. This will be a family home. You'll use it too. That last part should have been comforting, but instead it felt like a hook. I should have insisted they sit down with me and actually calculate what they could afford. Instead, I let their enthusiasm bulldoze my better judgment. I told myself they were happy, and that was what mattered. 6 months later, reality came crashing in. Mom called me late one evening, her voice trembling. Mara, we need your help. We can't make the mortgage payment this month. My stomach dropped. What happened to having it all figured out? We just need a little temporary help, she pleaded. Just until we get back on our feet. I rubbed my forehead. Have you thought about renting the house out until you can handle the payments? There was a pause, then Dad's voice, firm and unapologetic. We can't rent it. David moved in last week. My grip tightened on the phone. What? He moved in? You bought that place for family weekends. When did it become David's bachelor pad? He's been struggling to find steady work, Dad explained. This gives him stability, a chance to get his life together. I almost laughed. By living rent-free in a lake house? He'll pay once he finds a job, Dad added quickly. He's really trying. Trying? My voice cracked with disbelief. Dad, David's been fired from 6 jobs in the last year. 6. He doesn't show up, or he shows up drunk. What makes you think he's suddenly going to be responsible? He's young, Mom defended. He just needs support. Everyone needs a little help while they figure things out. I remembered myself at 24, working full-time, scraping together money for rent, carrying student loans. I hadn't had the luxury of figuring things out with no consequences. The anger in my chest was hot, but so was guilt. They were my parents. And beneath all my objections, part of me still wanted their approval. So when they kept calling, promising it was just temporary, I caved. I made the first payment, and then the next, and then the next. Before long, months blurred into over a year. The temporary help calcified into expectation. By then, I was sending $1,300 for the mortgage each month. On top of that, $500 directly to David, his expenses, though I knew most of it went to beer, cigarettes, and endless parties. I also covered $500 for my parents' groceries and $800 for utilities. The math wasn't hard. $3,100 drained from my bank account every single month, more than half my salary. And what did I get in return? Nothing but silence when I asked David to contribute, excuses from my parents, and a growing pit in my chest that swallowed every bit of joy I tried to hold on to. I'll never forget one dinner at my parents' place that winter. The house smelled of pot roast, the kind of comforting smell that used to mean home, but the conversation soured quickly. I asked David if he'd been applying for jobs. He smirked, swirling his soda. Yeah, sent in a few resumes. Dad chuckled like it was cute. He's figuring it out. You've got to give him time. Time? I set down my fork. I've been paying the mortgage for 6 months. How much more time does he need? Mom's eyes narrowed. Don't ruin dinner, Mara. We're grateful for your help. Can't you just support your brother instead of tearing him down? The unfairness made my throat ache. When I was his age, you told me to stand on my own 2 feet. You didn't cover my bills. You told me to figure it out. That was different, Mom snapped. Different. Always different when it came to David. The memories piled up like a case file. Mom storming into high school to argue with a teacher after David was caught cheating on a test. Dad buying him a car after he wrecked theirs texting behind the wheel. Both of them hiring an expensive lawyer to erase his underage drinking charges while reminding me I was on my own with student loans. The pattern was carved in stone long before the lake house. I just hadn't seen how far they'd go to uphold it. That night, I drove home from dinner with tears stinging my eyes, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I promised myself I'd only keep paying a little longer, just until they got their act together. But weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. David never found work. My parents never lifted a finger to cover their own bills. And I kept writing checks, drowning in responsibility that wasn't mine. By the time my birthday came around, I was so used to sacrificing that I barely noticed anymore. It was like I'd accepted my role as the family's silent backbone, until David slammed that door in my face. That was the moment something inside me shifted. The betrayal was too sharp, the humiliation too raw. For the first time, I realized the quiet truth. They weren't just leaning on me. They were using me. And if I didn't stop it, they'd bleed me dry forever. For the next year and a half, my life became a cycle of work, worry, and quiet resentment. Every month, without fail, more than half my paycheck disappeared before I could even breathe. $3,100 gone. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, David's so-called expenses. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that my parents would regain their footing, that David would finally take responsibility. But as the months dragged on, the temporary arrangement hardened into routine, and routine became expectation. The worst part was how invisible it all was. My parents never thanked me. David never acknowledged it. It was as if my sacrifice had been absorbed into the walls of that house, invisible and unworthy of recognition. Meanwhile, I lived small. I stopped buying new clothes, cut back on dinners with friends, canceled streaming subscriptions. I remember standing in the grocery store one evening, staring at the price of a block of cheese, debating if I could justify it. Cheese. While David was posting photos on social media of lake parties, beer pong tournaments, bonfires by the water, and endless nights out. It wasn't just the money. It was the constant ache of being the only adult in a family that refused to grow up. One night at work, I sat at my desk long after everyone had gone home, the glow of my computer screen blurring through tears I refused to let fall. A coworker, Henry, passed by on his way out. He paused, concern in his voice. "You okay, Mara?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just catching up." He lingered, but didn't push. When the elevator doors closed behind him, I finally let out a shaky breath. How could I explain that the reason I looked exhausted, the reason my rent check was always late, the reason I skipped lunches was because I was quietly financing an entire household that wasn't mine? Who would believe me? The loneliness of carrying that secret was crushing. At family gatherings, The favoritism was so blatant, it was almost laughable. I'd arrive after a long week at work, still in my office clothes, and Mom would immediately fuss over David. "He's been working so hard on his resume," she'd say proudly, while he lounged on the couch in sweatpants, scrolling on his phone. Dad would chuckle. "He's got potential, just needs the right break." Then they'd look at me and ask, "So, when are you finally going to find a boyfriend?" I wanted to scream. I was keeping their lives afloat, yet somehow I was still the one under subtle scrutiny, the one expected to smile and nod. Sometimes, when I drove out to drop off a check or meet with the bank, I'd catch sight of the country house in full swing. Cars lining the driveway, music blasting, strangers smoking on the porch. Once, I pulled up just in time to see David stumble out with two girls, laughing so loudly it echoed off the lake. He waved at me like I was a delivery driver. "Money in the mailbox, sis?" he slurred, not even bothering to invite me in. That night, I sat in my car with the envelope still in my lap, staring at the glow of the house. My chest ached so badly it felt like my ribs were splintering. I wasn't his sister anymore. I was his sponsor. I thought back to when we were kids, how at 16 I'd taken a part-time job just to afford my own car insurance. Meanwhile, David had wrecked Dad's car at 17 and been rewarded with his own shiny used sedan a month later. I remembered sitting on my bed the night they told me they couldn't help with my college tuition, how I filled out loan forms alone, while David had Mom filling out job applications on his behalf years later. The double standard wasn't new. It had been stitched into the fabric of our family all along. I just hadn't realized how far it would go until I was literally paying for their survival. The breaking point came slowly, like water boiling in a pot. Little things piled up, seeing my friends buy houses, plan vacations, build lives. I nodded along and clapped for them, while inside I felt like I was drowning. The moment that crystallized, everything happened a few weeks before my birthday. I was eating instant noodles at my kitchen counter when my phone buzzed. A notification. David had tagged me in a photo. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was a shot of him at the lake house, grinning ear to ear, a beer in one hand and a sparkler in the other. The caption read, "Living the dream, homeowner life." The comments poured in. "So jealous. That house is gorgeous. Must be nice." Homeowner life. My money, his glory. Something cracked in me. For the first time, the simmering resentment turned into something sharper, colder. I started to imagine what would happen if I stopped paying, if I just let the weight drop from my shoulders. But fear kept me chained. Fear of disappointing my parents, fear of being labeled selfish, fear of being cut off completely. Even after everything, some part of me still wanted their love. So I kept paying. I kept playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the invisible provider, until that night, on my birthday, standing in the driveway with my friends at my back, as David slammed the door in my face and locked me out of the house I'd been financing. That was the moment the fear began to dissolve. By the next morning, when I woke with a pounding headache and sat staring at my bank statements, the decision formed with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was done. I was done paying, done enabling, done bleeding myself dry for people who treated me like an outsider in my own family. The quiet sacrifice had ended. What came next would be my quiet revenge. The morning after my ruined birthday, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and my laptop open. My head throbbed from the wine I'd used to numb the sting of humiliation, but my mind was sharper than it had been in months. I pulled up my banking app. The cursor blinked on the screen like it was daring me. My hands trembled, not from hesitation, but from the sheer weight of what I was about to do. First, I canceled the $1,300 mortgage payment, gone with one click. Then the $500 monthly transfer to David's account, his spending money, which I now realized was nothing more than a bar tab I'd been covering. Next, the $500 automatic payment to my parents' grocery bills. If they could afford to gift a house, they could afford to buy their own food. Finally, the $800 I'd been paying for their utilities. 4 clicks, 4 tiny acts of rebellion, and with them, my chain snapped. I sat back, exhaling. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest lightened. I didn't tell anyone. No announcement, no confrontation. I just waited. It didn't take long. 4 days later, my phone lit up at 7 a.m. with my mother's name. I let it ring out. She called again and again. Finally, I answered. "Mara!" Her voice was sharp, panicked. Where's the money? The mortgage didn't go through. Do you have any idea what you've done? I took a sip of coffee, steady. Yes, I've stopped paying. You can't just stop. We rely on you. Do you hear yourself? I cut in. You rely on me? Mom, you and Dad made it clear that house belongs to David. You told me I wasn't welcome there, so why on earth would I keep paying for it? Her breath came hard through the line. You're being ridiculous. Of course you're welcome. No, I said firmly. You can't rewrite history. Saturday night, you said David owns the house, so let David pay for it. But he doesn't have a job, she snapped. Sounds like a problem for the homeowner, I replied, my voice cool. For a long moment, there was silence. Then she hissed, You're spiteful. This isn't about money. This is about you punishing us. I laughed bitterly. This is about me being done. Done paying while you give away everything I cover. Done being treated like an outsider in my own family. Done being your ATM. Before she could respond, I hung up. The calls didn't stop. My father tried next. His voice was low, controlled. Mara, this is childish. Families support each other. Families don't let one child bankroll everything while the other gets handed keys to the kingdom, I shot back. If David is the chosen one, then he can step up. When I hung up again, my phone exploded with texts. Long, guilt-ridden paragraphs from Mom, short, angry bursts from Dad. I muted them all. 2 days later, it escalated. At 11 p.m., pounding rattled my apartment door. My stomach clenched as I looked through the peephole. David. He swayed slightly, his face flushed, eyes glassy. Drunk. Mara, he shouted, slamming his fist against the door. Open up. You can't do this to me. I didn't unlock it. Go home, David. Not until you give me the money. The bank's breathing down my neck. You're trying to make me lose my house just because you're pissed off. Your house, I repeated, the words sharp with mockery. Funny how it was yours when you kicked me out. But now suddenly it's my responsibility again? You know I don't have a job, he shouted. Then get one, I said simply. It's not that complicated. He kicked the door, hard enough that the frame shuddered. You're doing this to get revenge. You're a bitter, jealous. I raised my voice, steady and cold. I'm doing this because I'm done being treated like garbage. If you want to keep that house, pay for it yourself. If you can't, then maybe you shouldn't have it. His voice cracked. I can't get a job that pays enough for the mortgage. You know that. Then you'll lose it, I said flatly. Another violent kick shook the door. I'm not leaving, he bellowed. I'll sleep here if I have to. I stood close enough to the door that he could hear me clearly. No, you won't, because if you're not gone in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. There was a long pause, then a stream of curses, shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Finally, his footsteps retreated down the hall, uneven and stumbling. I leaned my forehead against the door, breathing deeply. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from power. For the first time, David needed me, and I didn't cave. For the first time, I had slammed the door, not him. That night, lying awake in bed, I realized something. The quiet revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about reclaiming myself, about reminding them, and me, that I wasn't their pawn anymore. But I also knew this was just the beginning. The house of cards I'd been propping up was collapsing, and soon the fallout would hit harder than any slammed door ever could. It didn't take long for the cracks to spread. 2 weeks after I cut off the payments, the first official letter arrived at my parents' house. Foreclosure warning. By the third notice, they were panicked. My phone became a battlefield of missed calls, voicemails dripping with anger, others thick with begging. Then came the ambush. One Friday evening after work, I walked toward my car in the dim glow of the parking garage. My stomach clenched as I saw them waiting, my parents, leaning against the hood of my car like hunters lying in wait. Mara, we need to talk, Dad said, his tone controlled but tight. Mom's face was drawn, her eyes tired. The bank is threatening to foreclose. We can't stop it without your help. I froze, clutching my purse strap. You mean David can't stop it? He doesn't have the means, Mom said quickly, stepping closer. But you do. Please, sweetheart, don't let this happen. I laughed bitterly. Sweetheart, Saturday night you called me a trespasser. Now I'm sweetheart again, because you want my money? Dad's jaw tightened. We all said things we didn't mean. Let's just move past that. We're family. I unlocked my car door. If we're family, then maybe you should have thought about that before handing David the house I was paying for. Mom grabbed my arm, desperation in her grip. Mara, please, don't let them take the house away just because you're angry with us. I shook her hand off. I'm not taking anything away. David is. He's the one refusing to work. He's the one living like a child. I won't clean up after him anymore. I slid into the driver's seat, their faces pale in the headlights as I pulled out. My chest ached, but I didn't waver. The guilt came later, in the quiet of my apartment. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I was cruel, if maybe I should step in, just one last time. But then I'd remember David's smug grin as he slammed the door in my face, or my parents' voices coldly telling me the house belonged to him. Every time I replayed those moments, the guilt melted back into resolve. Word spread through the family like wildfire. My cousin Rachel cornered me at the grocery store a month later, eyes alight with gossip. "Oh my God, Mara," she whispered, as if she'd been waiting all week for this. "I heard about the house. Is it true you stopped paying?" I tossed apples into my cart, keeping my voice casual. "It's true." Her eyes widened. "Well, did you know they lost it? The bank foreclosed 3 months ago. David had to move back in with your parents." I paused, the apple in my hand suddenly heavy. Really? I had no idea. Rachel leaned in, lowering her voice even though no one was around. "It's a disaster. He sleeps until noon, plays video games all day, goes drinking every night. He's been bringing random girls home, keeping your parents up with his noise. Last week, he crashed your mom's car while drunk." I placed the apple in my cart, unmoved. "Sounds about right." Her voice turned sly. "Your mom told mine they're really struggling without your help. They had to cancel cable, even cut back on groceries. They don't know what to do." I straightened, meeting her gaze. "They should have thought of that before giving away my house." Rachel hesitated. "Are you ever going to forgive them?" I laughed softly, the sound more bitter than amused. "Forgive? They didn't just hurt my feelings, they exploited me. For a year and a half, I paid while they gave the house to David and let him treat me like garbage. And when I needed them, when I was standing in the driveway on my birthday, they told me to get lost. That's not something you forgive and forget." Rachel shifted uncomfortably, as if she'd expected a different answer. "Well, maybe David will change, eventually." I shook my head. "He's 26. If he hasn't changed by now, he won't. Why would he? He's always had someone else clean up his messes. Now it's their turn." I pushed my cart down the aisle, leaving Rachel behind. At home that night, I thought about her question. Forgiveness. The word tasted foreign on my tongue. My parents hadn't just betrayed me once. They'd spent years carving me into the responsible one, while they coddled David. The foreclosure was just the natural end of the path they chose. The truth settled heavy but clear in my chest. I didn't owe them forgiveness. I owed myself freedom. In the weeks that followed, I heard more updates from relatives, each one confirming what I already knew. My parents' house was in chaos. David was spiraling, their finances crumbling. And through it all, I stayed silent. I didn't gloat, I didn't intervene, I just lived. And for the first time in years, my life was my own. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence, peace, and a bank account that finally grew instead of bled. For the first time in years, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. Each month, an extra $3,100 sat in my account like a quiet promise of freedom. I opened a savings account just for it, and the balance grew so quickly it made my head spin. With the weight of my family's bills gone, I discovered what life could actually feel like. I could breathe. I could sleep. I could go out to dinner without guilt, buy a dress without calculating which bill I'd be short on. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. One Saturday morning, I stood in the sunlight of a downtown cafe with a real estate agent, flipping through glossy brochures, condos, townhouses, small places, modest, but mine. I could actually picture it, signing papers, holding the keys, unlocking a door that no one could ever slam in my face again. The idea filled me with a strange mix of joy and grief. Joy, because I was finally building a life for myself. Grief, because it had taken losing my family to get here. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the night in the parking garage. I hadn't answered David's calls since he'd drunkenly kicked at my apartment door. In their silence, I found strength. But in quiet moments, I wondered if they ever thought about me, about what they'd lost. Not the money, not the house, me. The dependable daughter who'd always been there when the lights needed paying, when groceries ran out, when their son needed endless lifelines. They hadn't just lost financial support, they'd lost their safety net, their scapegoat, the one person who made sure the family didn't collapse under its own dysfunction. Now they were stuck with each other. My parents in their 60s, scrambling to cover bills they hadn't touched in years. My brother, still jobless, still reckless, draining them dry the way they once drained me. The irony wasn't lost on me. For so long I'd been terrified of what would happen if I stopped paying. But the truth was, nothing happened to me. It only happened to them. I ran into Rachel again one afternoon at the grocery store. She had that same gleam of gossip in her eyes. "Did you hear?" she whispered, leaning close. "Your parents are at their breaking point. David's worse than ever. He sleeps all day, brings strangers home at night. Your mom can't take it. She told my mom she sometimes wishes he'd just leave, but she can't say it out loud." I nodded, tossing bananas into my basket. Not surprising. Rachel hesitated. "Do you feel bad at all?" I thought about it. I thought about my birthday, standing outside that locked door, about the countless months of sacrifice, the years of being told I had to be strong while David was allowed to stumble. Finally, I answered, "No, I don't feel bad. They made their choice. I made mine." Rachel pressed her lips together, maybe hoping for a more dramatic answer, then walked away. I didn't care. Because the truth was, I didn't feel bad. I felt free. That night, I sat on my couch with a notebook, scribbling numbers. With the money I'd saved, I could make a down payment on a condo within a year. A place with sunlight in the mornings, quiet in the evenings, a place that was wholly, irrevocably mine. I imagined myself standing at the door, sliding the key into the lock, stepping into silence that belonged only to me. No arguments, no guilt, no obligations waiting on the counter, just my life. For so long, I'd believed family meant sacrifice, that loving them meant carrying their weight, even if it broke me. But family without respect isn't family at all. It's a leash. And I'd finally cut mine. Sometimes, late at night, I let myself wonder, will they ever realize what they lost? Will they ever sit in their crumbling house and think, we drove her away, we chose him over her, and now we're paying the price? Maybe, maybe not. But that's no longer my problem. Because now, for the first time, I'm building something for myself. Not a family home I'll never be welcome in. Not a future built on guilt and obligation. My own home, my own life. And no one will ever slam that door on me again.